Hello and welcome to Beyond the Point podcast with me, Ali Christensen. I'm curating the content I wish I had had as a dancer and creating strong, healthy, thriving dancers for the future. Not only am I your host and ex-professional dancer, but I own Align Fitness here in Huntington Beach, California, and I'm the creator of online courses for dancers such as lower body flexibility and turnout for dancers. This week's guest is probably someone you recognize from Instagram. He's been on So You Think You Can Dance. He's danced with the Newsies on Broadway, worked with the Oscars, done movies, commercials, and more. I'm very excited to have Alex Wong as this week's guest. Alex was very gracious with his stories in sharing his time with Miami City Ballet as a principal dancer, deciding how to make a jump from the professional ballet world into the commercial world, what he had to do to be on So You Think You Can Dance and to keep that journey going, including several injuries that he's come back from. As you listen to his interview, you'll see it would have been very easy for Alex to quit at any point of time during most of his stories. I'm so grateful he didn't because he lights up the Instagram world and the dance world with his short clips. He's a stunning performer and dancer, very talented, and he is here for the next hour with us. So let's dive right into the interview. So today on the podcast, I'm so happy to be chatting with Alex Wong. Thank you so much for coming on, Alex.
Hey. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so happy to. You're in New York right now, correct?
Yes, just got back yesterday.
Oh, nice. Are you commuting back and forth from LA to New York frequently?
I guess it depends what frequent is. It just it this past month it's been mostly in LA, and then I also travel every weekend. So there's just a lot of commuting going.
That's pretty even if it's frequent.
Like even if it's like in between cities. So like I'll be like in LA, but then still traveling to another city on the weekend, and then I'll be in New York. Yeah, so it just kind of depends on what I'm working on at the moment. The past like half year, I've really been in LA a lot. I consider myself bi-coastal. So I kind of split my time between the two. However, my base is New York.
Right. So what keeps you traveling these days? Is it teaching? Is it jobs? Is it dancing for organizations or companies?
So for LA, it's jobs. So New York and LA are jobs, and then for weekends, I teach at conventions on the weekends. So that. Like, I don't know, 35 or so weekends a year.
Oh, my goodness. I was going to say this is convention season, but you just blew that season out of the water. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's awesome, though. How did that transition into being a dancer who probably competed and did the convention circuit, and then now you're an influencer, you're an amazing choreographer and teacher. How did you make that transition, and was it smooth for you?
So I actually didn't really participate in too many conventions growing up because in Canada we didn't really have them.
Really?
We had competitions. They're not quite the same as the ones in the States. We had some that were of a similar format, but most of us kind of competed in these nonprofit dance festivals when we were younger. And then I think, did I ever do like a full convention? There may have been one or two where I did a full convention, like a weekend thing, but we didn't really have that in Canada when I grew up. But I was aware of what they were. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't until after So You Think You Can Dance, which was when I kind of started doing some conventions.
Gotcha. Yeah. When you're in Canada, did you start training in ballet from a young age? I feel like I read or heard you say sometime that you started with tap.
Yeah, I started with jazz and tap, actually,
awesome.
When I was 7. And then I didn't start ballet till I was about 10.
Okay. What made you push into ballet?
So I was doing jazz and tap at the time, 7 years old. That was my strongest. That's what I really liked. And 3 years or so into it, my teacher was like, if you want to get serious in dancing, you have to take ballet. And she sent me to another studio, actually.
That's a good teacher.
Yeah.
Willing to say, like, leave me to go pursue.
Yeah, she was like, you can only go to this one studio. And so she sent me to this one ballet studio. And I hated it at first. For at least the first 3 years, I really, really disliked ballet because I just felt like it was so boring. I remember I would show up sometimes with my ballet clothes underneath and just say like, "Oh, forgot my dance clothes. Can't say class." Like sit out and watch class because I couldn't bear doing it because I hated it so much. But it was really good for my basics and my technique and everything. I knew I had to do it, so I forced myself to do it, and I really saw improvement. And it was hard because it was also really far. Like the studio was about an hour, 15 minutes away from where I lived. So like my mom drove me 3 to 4 times a week initially before I started taking it every day.
Yeah. Were your parents supportive? I mean, they obviously worked, they were driving you, but were they were they a reason that you stayed in ballet? Because if you didn't like it, I think it would have been really easy to jump ship, right? And go back to tap and jazz.
If I had said I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't force me to do anything. I knew that I had to do it.
That says a lot about your training.
My teacher made it clear that if I wanted to get serious in dancing, I had to take ballet. And so I knew that I had to do it if I wanted to do other things. And at that time, I like jazz and stuff like that was really important to me. So I knew that I had to do it to get better. I wouldn't have left or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And especially after a year, I already saw major improvements. Like the next year when I was competing, everyone was like, "Whoa, what happened? Like, what did he do?" Like whatever. And I had been taking a lot of ballet, and it showed like right away. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So when did you end up coming into the U.S.? Because I know you had a professional career here in ballet. So
yes.
When did you make that shift?
So I made that transition actually right out of high school. I guess what helped me was I competed in Prix de Lausanne,
Mm-hmm.
And I won. And that gave me the ability to choose the apprentice scholarship, which I chose American Ballet Theater. So in 2004, that's when I joined. That got me my O1 visa, my artist visa. And then after that, I moved and changed companies to Miami City Ballet. And I was there for 5 years. I was a principal dancer before I left.
Mm-hmm.
And right before I left, I got my green card because I needed my green card to do So You Think You Can Dance.
Man, you had to jump through hoops to do So You Think You Can Dance. I did. I remember you very clearly. And you're a name that has stood like this entire time, stood out. And as I was looking a little bit at the timeline, I didn't even realize you didn't actually even compete that long on So You Think You Can Dance because you injured yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, for those of you who are maybe younger and don't remember this generation of So You Think You Can Dance, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, you were somebody who stood out so clearly. You had to leave the first time because of your contract with Miami City Ballet. And
Correct.
Then when you came back, you injured yourself. And then you ended up being with with So You Think You Can Dance as an all-star and doing all that kind of stuff. But it was such a short time. And I don't know if it felt short to you, but I just wanted to say you always have stood out in my mind as someone from So You Think You Can Dance who was phenomenal. And it was very short.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty short. I think the only thing, so I made it to top 20 in season 5, and that was when I couldn't join because of my contract with Miami City Ballet. They had like a little, I did it the following year, but they had like a little season in between. So that's why my season was actually season 7. The advantage to my season was that that was the season they consolidated it to a top 10 plus all-stars. So there was very few of us to start with already. And so I had made the top 10 and then, let me think, 10, 9, 8. So I think I was on there for 4 to 5 weeks. So it would have been top 7, I think, before I left. I think 4 to 5 weeks. So it was like short because if I had done it all the way, I think it would have been 10 weeks. I mean, I was on the finale episode, so I was also on that week.
Yeah.
But then obviously I returned as an all-star, so I kind of continued working on the show. But yeah, it was like a little less than halfway for my season, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you, for that first, when you auditioned and you got the top 20 and you had to decide between going with So You Think You Can Dance and then with your career that you've, spent the last 20 years building, do you remember any of the thoughts and how you came to that decision? Because that's a hard one. I mean, you're leaving two big possibilities that both are really great.
Yeah. The first time wasn't a decision.
You had a contract.
Yeah, I showed up and for Green Mile, and I remember Nigel saying, we love you. We really like you to be on the show. He goes, I called Edward Villella, which was the director of Miami City Ballet at the time, and asked him to release you from your contract. And he said no. And I know they got in a huge fight.
Oh, really?
But
they wanted you. They both wanted you so bad.
Yeah, but he said no. And so, unfortunately, we can't have you this season. Please come back next season with our blessing. And, we would love to have you, blah, blah, blah. So I remember being really devastated because I sort of auditioned on the first time for So You Think You Can Dance on a whim. I was sort of looking for a change, and they were coming through Miami. So I went to the audition, and not really gunning for it, but then I made it to Vegas week, and it was during Vegas week that I really realized that I'd missed doing other forms of styles other than ballet. I remember it was nappy tabs and Mia Michaels and Sonia and Tice and whatever, through all the Broadway jazz, contemporary, ballroom, hip hop rounds and everything. And I remember being really, really inspired. So it was after Vegas week that I decided that I was oh, I really, really want to do this. And then there's a big chunk post Vegas until you do the Green Mile, the results of the top 20, because they do background checks, they check all the tapes to check your personality and blah, blah, blah. So there's a huge vetting process, about a 1 month wait between the end of Vegas week and when they actually choose you. So I really, really wanted it after Vegas week. And then I didn't make it, and it was really, really devastating. But I had decided from that moment that the following year, I would honor my contract, and then the following year I would just have to quit. Without knowing whether or not I would make it on the show, I would just have to quit my company and then re-audition for So You Think You Can Dance.
Wow, that's a huge decision. I know for myself, having worked towards a career, deciding to leave something that I felt like I'd worked my whole life for. And I think it's very easy, especially back, 10, 15 years ago, there weren't as many dance options as I feel like there are now. And maybe they existed, but they weren't as readily available. Social media wasn't there. It didn't seem as feasible to be doing all these different avenues of dance. So it felt like company life was the only way to make it, quote, make it as a professional dancer. So I can imagine that decision of I'm assuming my mental training up till that point to say I'm going to take a huge leap of faith, and it worked out for you. It looks like it did, but that's a huge trust in yourself that you'll make whatever works. Whatever happens works for you. You're going to make it work, and you trust in yourself.
Yeah, that was definitely a leap. I think it was when I was about 14, 15, I was at a crossroads because I was training in jazz and tap and in contemporary and everything, but also training in ballet equally. And that was when I was kind of at a crossroads where I was like, okay, so do I go into company life and ballet life where you get into a company and then you have steady work and blah, 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 or do I try to do the commercial dance route, maybe Broadway or TV or whatever? And at that time, so this would have been early 2000s, I didn't really see any Asians on TV. I didn't really think it was realistic to be able to be cast in a Broadway show where it's like West Side Story and they only need these type of people, or like I just didn't really see any Asians on TV. So one of the main reasons that I chose to go ballet was because I felt like companies were a little more colorblind, and I felt like I would be able to get into a company and have steady work and whatever. So that was one of the reasons why I chose company life first. And then, several years into it, I was like, okay, I think I'm seeing more color on TV, and I think that I can make this happen, and I miss doing these other things. So that's kind of why I decided to make that leap. But it was a little bit of a leap of faith because I wasn't, re-signing with my company. And I remember my director really wanted me to. And I had already made up my mind at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Because I remember he called me in for a meeting and he was like, oh, like everything's looking really good, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, it's great. I said, but like, I am leaving like at the end of the season. And
yeah.
I said, I really appreciate everything you've done for me, because he had done a lot for me. And I like really like it here in Miami, and I consider it my home. But like, this is calling me, and like, I really have to try.
Yeah. What do you feel like being in a company did for you that you still use today in your life?
Well, I think just ballet in general, and ballet company, just like the discipline of the physical discipline and the mental discipline that it takes to do that. That definitely has helped me in terms of anything, I guess, physical. I never really find too difficult in jobs, just because the ballet career is so physically demanding.
Right.
Obviously, there's challenges in the commercial world in many, many other ways other than physicality. But yeah, and so technically, I've never faced a job that was technically too difficult in terms of technique, like old school technique. Mm-hmm. And also like just discipline and taking care of my body and warming up, things like that. That's definitely come from that world.
Yeah. You've had a couple Achilles injuries that
right
actually were the reasons you've had to make big steps and jumps. How have you worked through those, and emotionally? I'm interested in the emotion, because that's hard to have a big injury like that.
Yeah. So I was on the show, and I was a front runner on the show. I actually had just really a great week before I snapped my Achilles. And top 7, I snapped my Achilles, which is, a lot of people think it's the knee, but it's like near the ankle, your tendon on the back of your ankle, that one, that kind of snapped in half while I was jumping. And I was doing like consecutive jumps in second, and it snapped. And then basically you have to like sew it back together. Ugh. So with surgery. And so it takes about a year of recovery. I remember my surgeon being like, don't rush it. Like, think 1 year, it's going to be 1 year. And I was like, okay, like, what am I going to do? Like, I just kind of pretended I wasn't a dancer. And I just kind of, the first injury, I was like, not really sure what to do. Mm-hmm. So I had left New York for 5 years because I was in Miami City Ballet at the time. And the idea of returning to New York really excited me. So there was some of the best physical therapists in New York. So I actually got my surgery in LA with a surgeon that I found that was really, really good. And then I did my physical therapy in New York. And during that time, I kind of just pretended I wasn't a dancer. I just kind of I don't know. I didn't really do much. I think I was, I think I was singing, and I kind of forget because I get my first and second recovery a little mixed up.
Yeah.
I remember. I was singing, and I think I was doing some acting, just kind of like working on other things that I had not really done. And I auditioned for American Idol.
Oh, you did?
I remember I made it to the semifinals in Hollywood.
Jack of all trades. No wonder you like Broadway. Goodness.
And so I remember that first recovery took almost a year. It was like 6 months until I could start taking ballet class very slowly. Because basically, like, you're in a cast for 2 months, and then you're in a boot, and you slowly adjust the angle of the boot. You're in a cast, in a pointed cast, and then you slowly adjust the angle of the boot to stretch out the Achilles, and then the physical therapist
more
will,
towards
like,
a flex.
yeah, and you can't go too fast because otherwise, it's like, because it's like baby tissue, so otherwise it'll completely stretch out, and you'll lose all tension, or it'll be too tight. So it's kind of like very specific. And then the following 6 months, it's kind of like it settles in. And I remember actually auditioning towards the end of that. I remember auditioning for Aladdin before it came to Broadway. They do like a Seattle out of town tryout. I got it, but then I was returning as an all-star on So You Think You Can Dance, so I didn't take it. So then this is a year and 3 days later. I'm about to start So You Think You Can Dance in 3 days. I already have my choreographer. I'm an all-star. I know that I'm like on the episode in a few days. I'm starting. And I was at audition for Step Up 4, and I snapped my other Achilles.
No.
And I remember knowing I snapped it when I did it. It was like towards the end of the audition, just during the freestyle section. I was just doing those jumps in second again, and I landed, and I was like, oh, there it goes. I just snapped my other one. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't want to make it like dramatic or anything, so I finished off my freestyle on one leg, and then I just kind of like walked off, like pretending, like, after I finished the freestyle, then they're like, okay, cool, thank you, whatever, and they just walked away, like, as if I was like really tired, because like,
yeah, you did a limpy cool step.
Yeah, a limpy cool step, because you actually can't really walk because you can't push off because your Achilles isn't there, so it's kind of like a stump,
like a drag.
It just feels like not quite a drag because you can still bend your knee, but it's like a stump, that in the sense that like you can't push off the foot. It's almost just like
flat foot stepping down.
Yeah, it's like a flat foot stepping down. It's like very flappy and whatever. So I remember walking myself slowly to my car, and because it was the left foot this time, I could still drive, which was great. And I remember thinking like, oh, should I bother going to the hospital? Like, I already know what it is. I was texting my surgeon at that time. This was Saturday night, probably at like 8 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
It was kind of late. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, can you get me into surgery to snap my other one? And I remember he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, because I can get you in on Monday morning. It was like very fast. Like, I wanted it to be fast because it was a year and 3 days after my first one. I just wanted to recover before my first one. All I wanted to do was get to recovery, get into surgery before my first one, get into PT before my first one. Like, I wanted the timeline to be faster.
Yeah.
So I remember being like, get me into surgery now, like ASAP, like as soon as you can. And I remember driving myself to the hospital, went up to the counter and was like, hey, I snapped my Achilles. And the person was like, oh, I remember you from last year. You snapped your Achilles last year, right? And I was like, yep, that's me. And she was like, yeah, we don't get a lot of those. I was like, yeah, I snapped it. And then so I went in, they gave me a splint. They were like, oh, we'll get you an x-ray and then we'll get you out of here. And I was like, hold on, what's the x-ray for? They're like, we just want to make sure that nothing else. I was like, forget the x-ray. I was like, I'm not going to pay for it. Like, this health insurance. I was like, forget the x-ray. I know I just snapped the Achilles. I already have a surgery scheduled Monday morning. I was like, I'm just going to leave. They're like, oh, okay. Like, I was like, yeah. Like, so, you know your body. Like, I'm like, nothing else is broken. I know I snapped the Achilles. I know exactly what it feels like. I already have surgery on Monday. Don't worry about the x-ray. I wasn't even going to come.
My surgeon's on speed dial. I got it.
My surgeon's on speed dial. I literally texted him. I was like, get me on the table. So yeah, the second time around, it actually was so much better. I think my body just knew. It was like, oh, this is a snapped Achilles. Oh, I know this surgery. I know how to heal from it. And I remember like a week out of surgery, I was like teaching on conventions. I remember like being on crutches and like swinging my leg around with like a cast. And I was like not wasting any time the second time around. I was like doing everything. And then I just remember recovering a lot faster. There was no complications in my PT. I remember I wasn't even like doing any of the exercises, and it was like recovering. Like I was like, I remember my surgeon being like, whoa, like you're going really fast. I'm like, I'm not even doing anything. Like,
interesting.
Literally, like, I was like, I promise you, like, I'm not even doing my exercises and like the muscle's already there. Like it was way faster. And I remember like the first time around, it was like 6 months in until I took my class. The second time around, it was like 4 months in and I was doing my first job.
Oh my gosh, that's fast.
Yeah, and I remember being like, okay, like obviously I can't jump on this, but I can land on one foot and I can also take off on my other foot. So I was like, I can compensate. Like it was for Smash, that NBC show. And I knew the choreographer, and he knew that, you know, I was just coming back from stuff, so like I could just compensate kind of however I needed to. And then because I had auditioned for Aladdin, Disney had remembered me, and they called me in for Newsies, and they're like, hey, you've been cleared vocally already, like, would you like to do Newsies? We already did an out-of-town tryout, and it's coming to Broadway, and we're just trying to add a few cast members. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so that was August, September, October, November, December, January, February. So 7 months into my recovery was when I opened Newsies.
Wow.
or started Newsies. We opened, I guess, a month later. And like coming from the ballet world, I was like, so Newsies is known as like one of the most technically difficult shows on Broadway. Mm-hmm. But I think coming from the ballet world, I was like, this is great. Like I'm in boots and this is going to be a perfect recovery show. Like, like, you know, it's like generally like such a difficult show, but I was like, this is going to be the perfect recovery show.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, I can take my time and I'm in boots. Like, you know, I don't need like when you're in boots, you don't need the same articulation as you do for ballet.
Yeah.
Even though it's dance boots, but like there's like a tiny heel on it, and like, the rest of my body was fine. It's just like certain jumps and whatever, but it was fine. By that time I was like ready. Like I was saying, my second recovery just healed so much faster.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wasn't even doing anything. So I was telling my surgeon, I was like, I can't go any slower because like it's already ready and I haven't done anything. Like there's like, it would just be me sitting doing nothing. Like it was like, it's ready. Like,
yeah,
it just recovered so much faster. So, yeah, so the second time around it was more difficult mentally, because the first time around I was in the middle of the show and it was devastating because I had given so much up to be on the show.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. It was like, I kept on trying to do this show and it wasn't letting me, but I had the support of like millions of viewers, and like people were tuning in to like my Twitter and like YouTube and things like that. And people were just really, really supportive. And I felt like I had like a lot, you know, with me. The second time around, it was less publicized because it happened
before the show aired.
Yeah, 2 days before the show aired. You know, they did say like Alex was supposed to be an all-star this week, and unfortunately he snapped his other Achilles, but it was like audio, right? So it's less publicized and it's not in front of people's faces. And so the second time I felt a lot more alone in that journey. Like it felt like I had literally just recovered, and to be slammed down again when I had just picked up my things and gotten okay again, was extremely difficult. That was the most difficult part of my time of my life, because I was dealing with some other things, and also like it just felt like nothing was going right.
Yeah.
I'm generally a really positive person, so it's not like I couldn't deal with it. There wasn't like days where I was like I can't, but it was hard. I remember being like, I don't know why this is happening to me. I get it. I got it. I got through the first time already. Sure, everything happens for a reason.
What's the reason for the second time?
What's the reason for the second time? Are you telling me that I shouldn't dance anymore? Like, is this like, don't go on the show, don't dance, what is the reason? Like, what's happening, you know?
Right.
Looking back on it, I'm, I guess, happy it happened. I mean, like, I had a Broadway debut because of it. I met people that I have in my life that I would like never give up for anything. And like, it's like, I get it. Everything happens for a reason. And I wouldn't change anything looking back on it. But it really did suck at the time.
It's hard to see that in the midst of the literal discomfort and pain and aggravation. And I think that sometimes we think that when you hear a story like yours, like, oh, he must have been devastated. And like you said, you weren't like in the dumps, you're a positive person, you could see that it's going to be okay, but that doesn't mean that you feel okay in the middle of it. You still have a plethora of emotions and things that are roller coasting up and down as you go through hard times. And for some reason, it feels like when I have a physical injury, other things in life kind of dump on that too. And I've noticed that as I've gone through a couple big injuries, it's like, okay, I don't know if my defenses are down or if I'm just raw and emotional. So, other areas of life kind of shine through. And I also think I'm a positive person and don't end up in a dumpy place, but it's rough. And even if you're not, quote, depressed, it can be rough.
Yeah, it was like super, super tough. And so I did think, should I continue dancing? Should I quit? What should I do? And then I kind of just let things happen, and then I came back into it. So it was fine, but yeah, super rough time during that time, especially the second one.
Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you still do those second jumps that you did? Literally
so
ruptured.
Enough, so I don't. I don't do them consecutively. I used to do it literally all the time. It was like in the Chinese dance in Nutcracker, which I did all Nutcracker season. So I do think if I was able to continue somehow the first time, I think both of the Achilles would have snapped. I hadn't done that jump for a year, and I did it again, and the other side snapped. So I was like, okay, they're even. Like at least they're even. At least it wasn't like although yes, it's like a quote unquote freak accident. Like the Achilles. Both of my Achilles are responding the same. Like it was like on the fifth jump that they snapped. So if I somehow could have continued, the other one would have gone.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, they're even. It wasn't like, it was a freak accident, but it wasn't like in the sense that like, I didn't like twist my ankle. It wasn't an accident in the sense that I did anything wrong. It's just like, I think maybe like my Achilles were, because you can snap your Achilles just from like stepping off a sidewalk. It's not something that's like whatever, but you can also snap it from like really high impact things. And so I think in my case, that would be that. And probably just the amount of stuff that I had been doing over the years. And not that my Achilles ever bothered me. I never had any Achilles issues. I was actually feeling really great both of the times when I snapped them. But I think, at least they're even. I think they would have gone at the same time had I been able to somehow continue. So now that they're both snapped, and recovered great, no complications or anything. I think I could theoretically do those jumps again if I wanted to, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I've probably done like 3 in a row. I just kind of stopped right before that. I'm like,
Yeah, 3 sounds like a safe number. As you're in the more commercial dance world, well, you are in the commercial dance world. I saw you on, was it Discover credit card? Is that the...
Oh, MasterCard.
MasterCard. Sorry, Discover. Sorry, MasterCard. MasterCard. I was like, hey, that's Alex. And it looks, I see your face popping up all these random places, which is so fun. How do you feel like your Instagram came about, and has that assisted you to get into the commercial world a little bit more?
Okay, so my Instagram, I guess, I definitely got... Unfortunately, Instagram wasn't around when I was a contestant on So You Think You Can Dance. I think it would have really helped had it been, but it didn't come around so late after that I didn't reap any benefits from it. So I definitely got like a little push from So You Think You Can Dance, and obviously the exposure of So You Think You Can Dance. A lot of people that do end up following me did watch me on the show. Obviously, like, when we all first started Instagram, nobody really knew what to post. Like, you're like posting pictures of trees, you're posting a picture of like your breakfast that looks like terrible, and you're just like, I don't know. And then I started posting pictures of dance, people like it, whatever. And then when Instagram introduced video, I started doing some random things, and then it just kind of evolved into whatever it is that I do now. And I kind of look at Instagram a little bit like as like a live business card, and it's also like a second income revenue stream. And yeah, it's a place where I can be like creative and silly and keep current. I think there is like an entire generation of dancers that only dance on social media, which is something that we couldn't have imagined back when we were training and things like that, because social media didn't even exist. Internet was just getting started when I was a kid, you know? And so, yeah, so now we have an entire generation of dancers that grew up on social media, and some dancers that only dance on social media. And I think that is great. They are the forefront of what they do, and they're the star of their own channel, and they get to do what they do. So I think that's kind of cool that there is so many different kinds of things that you can do with it. I totally forgot what I was talking about.
That's okay. You said that you view this as your business card, and I think that is very smart. I also think of it that way, as it's the way people get to know you and see you and get a sense of who you are. And the fact that, like you said, now somebody can look at a mass of videos of you and say, yes, I already know I want Alex, as opposed to looking at a paper resume that has a headshot and saying, I wonder what this person can do. I think that's where we're at. That's what we're seeing. I know that that's how I start working with people. They've already got a sense of who I am, and they call and say, I want to work with you. So you answered my question. How is it getting you jobs, and how are you using it in that way?
I think it also helps keep you on people's minds. So if they see something and they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, oh, I remember I've worked with him before. Like, oh, let's bring him in, or, whatever. So it just helps keep you fresh on people's mind. And obviously, like, before, like, walking on the streets, people were like, oh my God, I love you from So You Can Dance, whatever. Now, often it's like, oh my God, I love your Instagram. Like, it's like both. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, that's interesting that it's become like seeing the shift.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Have you had any downfalls from being on social media so much? I feel like part of being on Instagram for me is a little bittersweet. I personally have a very supportive community, and from what I've seen on yours, you have a very supportive community, and you are a light on your Instagram. So it's kind of hard to be negative, but I'm sure you get people once in a while, or maybe more, who come on and just rain on the parade. Do you have anything like that?
So in my life, I think I'm very good with moderation and whatever. So I think a lot of times people struggle with social media because, like, self-esteem things, or they're trying to do social media and then it consumes their whole life and whatever. I've just been kind of steady. I don't post that much, actually. People think I post all the time. I really only post like twice a week. I don't even really post stories. Like, I just post here and there. It is what it is. I'm not on any sort of schedule. If I don't feel like posting, I won't.
Yeah.
No pressure there. And I'm really silly. Like, I don't really take things that seriously. And so I think that reflects on my social media. I think it reflects on most of my followers. People don't really post hateful comments, which I've been very grateful for, I guess. But I think even if they did, it's an opinion, and it's a valid opinion, and I think it's okay. I think not everyone is gonna like everything you do. I'm not the type of person that is like, I don't listen to you, like, whatever. I think all opinions are valid. I think some people are going to think me dancing on the street is rude. And that's okay. And that's okay, because not everyone is going to like it. But if the majority do, sure, then that's okay. And I think it's valid to think that it's rude or you don't like it, because not everybody likes oranges. Not everybody likes apples, There is an opinion, and that's why we have the society, and that's why we have differences and things like that. It would be terrible if everyone agreed with everything.
Yeah.
So I think not taking offense to other people's opinions is super important. Which, I think I first of all, like I said, I don't get that many hateful comments, but I think when I do, I just read it and I'm like, okay, like, that's okay. It's okay that they didn't like it. And I will take that into account if I get like a ton of like the same thing, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, like I'll change it next time or whatever. But yeah, I think it's okay to have those comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh, a few months ago now, maybe it's longer than that, time flies. But when the big Boys Dance 2 with GMA stuff happened, I remember that your Instagram was the first one I saw of your comment. And I remember thinking, how nice Alex is. Like, it was a really good, you brought awareness but also, and said, I don't think this is okay. And I don't remember exactly what you said. But that was the first thing I saw. And then it started to hit social media in our dance community. How do you tie those two thoughts together where you're saying everyone's entitled to their opinion, which I absolutely agree with. And then, I know you were in New York, you were there with Travis Wall, you guys were outside of the GMA studios, and it was a beautiful, peaceful sharing of an experience. Can you tell me a little bit about being there and what you went through? You're a boy. How did that affect you? And what was your take on this whole situation?
So when I first saw that, I wasn't really sure how I felt about it initially. Because I could understand from a host point of view. She says something, the audience is laughing, and often you like build off of your audience or the feeling of the audience, and maybe she slipped in that moment, which often people do. People make mistakes, and I think that we're human. People make mistakes. What bothered me, I guess, was that she said that Prince George really enjoyed ballet, and then she continued on to say like, well, we'll see how long that lasts, and everyone was laughing, whatever, which I think it was a slip up. I think that like because the audience was already laughing and whatever, she kind of rolled with it. I think it was a quick lapse in judgment, and so. But it did bother me the longer I thought about it. And I was like, yeah, I don't think it's right, because I think it's the initial reaction. Whether or not, I think it's okay to have an initial reaction, but I think the initial reaction is damaging to young male dancers. And I had that issue when I was young. I was dancing when I was like 5, like around my room and whatever, and I would be choreographing things to show to my family. I remember bringing my family into like a bedroom. I'd turn off the lights. I'd give my dad a flashlight. I'd say, spotlight me. And then I would perform for them. And they would ask me, do you want to dance? And I was like, no, dancing's only for girls. At 5, where do I get that idea that dancing is only for girls? Where on earth would I have seen that, heard that, or whatever, that that opinion was so strongly rooted in me that I was dancing and didn't even know I was dancing. And let alone they asked me for 2 years and I kept on saying no. And then they eventually said, you know what, we're going to bring you to a local dance school show. And if you don't want to dance after that, we won't ask you anymore. And I was like, sure, sounds like a deal. I went to go see the show. I saw guys dancing and I wanted to start right away. But where did I get that instilled in me so strongly that dancing was only for girls that I refused to do it? And I was like, it's the media. It's the media that influences people around me, that influences me to think that it's wrong. And so I was like, it's things like this where a little flyby comment can be so damaging in the broader picture of things. So that's when I was like, okay, although it may not have been intentional, and although it may have been a light and funny joke, because it is such a sensitive subject, and because boys do get so much bullying and things like that because of dance, it makes it a really sensitive subject. And when you put things like that out there, especially on GMA, when they have guests of Broadway singers and dancers all the time. Yeah, so I sent it to, I sent the video to like Robbie and Derek Huff, James Whiteside, Travis Wall, just anyone I could think of that was notable in the dance industry. And because I really felt like it needed to be heard, and they needed to be responsible for their actions. Because with such damaging things that most boys grow up on, I didn't want it to continue. And within that time, they actually interviewed, I guess it was Travis, Fabrice, and Robbie. And Laura apologized on air to them and whatnot. But Monday we still had like a thing, and it was like over 300 people showed up.
Yeah, it was amazing.
To do like a ballet class in Times Square, and it was really incredible to see that support for dance, to see that support for those young boys that are dancing, and just to know that like people support them and that it's okay. But yeah, it was really incredible that everyone kind of really stood behind that, and I think it showed just how strong the dance community is and how much of a voice dancers have, especially with social media these days. Like we were saying, we were able to get an entire news station to apologize and acknowledge these things, these damaging, hurtful things that was said. And I know that she didn't mean it on purpose.
Yeah.
I think that it's, sometimes you let things slip.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thought you guys handled the whole thing so wonderfully. I loved all the attention that you all brought. And I just loved that all of the male dancers that have a little bit of presence on social media, I think used it so well and were such a great voice for the boys who aren't as comfortable, who had that experience that you did and are still hiding or feeling shamed or being bullied. Well, we're coming up on our time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for all of our young boys to hear this and the parents. I feel like a lot of the things you were talking about are things that we need to keep in our minds as our young dancers are training and as dancers are continuing to grow up. These are all challenges and things that you brought up that we will experience. So thank you, Alex, for coming on the podcast today. It's so fun to hear some of the inside stories, to the videos that we see on Instagram, to the time you were on So You Think You Can Dance, and all of your journey over the last 10 or so years when you've been a little bit more in the public eye. It's very fun for me. I love your artistry, your talent, and I love what you're putting out into the world right now. If you don't follow Alex on Instagram, you can find him at Alex D. Wong, and I recommend that you do. I very much look forward to when I see his posts pop up in my feed. And if you're like me and you tag your dance friends in Alex's Instagram posts, because I know we all do because he does amazing things, go ahead and send them this podcast because they're going to love it just as much as you and I did. We love to see Alex on Instagram, and it's so fun to hear the inside stories. And as an Alex lover and supporter on Instagram, if you would swipe up and leave a review for this episode on iTunes on Beyond the Point, you will assist other lovers of Alex's work to find this interview, have access to him, and the other guests that are here on the podcast. Hitting subscribe is also a great way for you guys to stay up to date with all of our guests, our information, our stories, our teachers, everyone who's coming on to give you a new perspective into the dance world. And you can do that by hitting subscribe, Spotify, iTunes, or Google Play. And as always, I will see you all back here next week on Beyond the Point.